On the night Lisa Hawthorne disappeared, the sky over Briar Ridge pulsed with color. It was the sort of rural town where darkness arrived early and stayed late, where people still believed. The woods listened and the stars watched when the lights came green at first. Then, a violent white that fractured across the tree line. Half the town saw them by morning. Everyone had an opinion, but only one person knew the truth. Evan Hawthorne. He stood on his porch long after the lights vanished, hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. His wife had been standing beside him minutes earlier, her hair lifted by the wind, her mouth half curved in amusement as she teased him for still believing in mundane explanations. "Relax," she'd said. "If aliens wanted me, they'd have taken me years ago." She laughed. Then the light fell over her like a net, and Lisa Hawthorne was gone by dawn. Briar Ridge was awake in a way it had not been since the mill fire of '98. Sheriff Tom Calder moved slowly through the Hawthorne property, boots crunching on gravel, notebook tucked beneath his arm. Evan sat on the porch steps, blanket around his shoulders, eyes red but dry. "Walk me through it again," the sheriff said gently. Evan nodded as though he'd been expecting the request all night. "We were stargazing," he said, "something we do every month." Lila noticed the lights first. "We thought it was a drone. Or, I don't know." Then it got brighter. "I couldn't move. I swear to God, Tom, I couldn't move." Calder scribbled. And then she screamed. Evan whispered. "Just once." And she was lifted, like gravity stopped working, straight up into the light. The sheriff hesitated. "You didn't try to grab her?" "I tried." Evan looked up, eyes shining. "I swear I did." Calder didn't write that down. Within 48 hours, Briar Ridge was crawling with people who'd never been there before. Reporters parked along Main Street. UFO enthusiasts camped in fields. Someone sold glow-in-the-dark t-shirts that read "Taken in Briar Ridge." Evan became the town's tragic centerpiece. He gave interviews he barely remembered afterward, repeating the same fractured details, until they sounded rehearsed, even to him. He let himself cry on camera once, hands covering his face, and that clip ran on a loop across cable news. What no one saw was how carefully he controlled the story. Lila had been fascinated by extraterrestrials once, only once, during a single obsessive summer after her sister's death. Evan made sure to mention that he talked about her curiosity, her open mind. He framed the abduction as something almost fitting. "She always believed there was more out there," he told one reporter softly. "I guess she was right." The reporter nodded, misty-eyed. At night, when the house was quiet and the town finally slept, the memories crept in. Not the lights, the argument. It had started hours earlier, inside the kitchen, where Lila stood barefoot on the tiles, holding Evan's phone. His phone, his secrets. "You lied to me," she said, voice steady in a way that terrified him for months. "It wasn't like that," Evan replied, already panicking. "I can explain." She laughed then, not kindly. "It always means something." The words escalated. Voices rose. Old resentment spilled out like broken glass, the money he'd been siphoning from her inheritance, the quiet way he'd been planning a life without her. "You don't get to erase me," Lila said finally. "I won't disappear so you can start over." That was when Evan realized how much he needed her to. The woods behind the house had been his idea. Stargazing, a ritual, a place without walls. When he pushed her, it was almost gentle. She hit her head on the stone at the edge of the clearing. The sound, dull, finally echoed in his skull. For weeks afterward, Evan knelt beside her, shaking, waiting for her to breathe. She never did. The idea came to him as he stared at the sky, desperate and hollow. Lights weren't unusual over Briar Ridge. Experimental aircraft from the base 2 counties over, meteors, drones. He'd seen strange things before, things no one ever fully explained. He dragged her body deeper into the trees, heart hammering, hands slick with blood. The old quarry pit, abandoned, fenced off but forgotten, waited like a mouth. He lowered her in, wrapped in a tarp from his truck, and buried her beneath loose rock and dirt. By the time he returned to the clearing, dawn was close. That was when the lights appeared. Evan never decided whether that was coincidence or mercy. Sheriff Calder didn't believe in aliens, but he believed in people even less. He visited Evan a week after the disappearance, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. The house smelled faintly of bleach. "Mind if I ask something off the record?" Evan nodded. "You and Lila, things good between you two?" Evan's pulse spiked. "Of course." Calder leaned back. "Neighbors heard shouting earlier that evening." Evan forced a laugh. "Married people argue, they do," Calder agreed. "But they usually make up before going stargazing." Evan met his gaze. "Are you accusing me of something?" The sheriff studied him for a long moment. Then he stood. "No," Calder said, "just asking." But his eyes lingered on the back door, on the muddy boot prints that still hadn't quite faded. The town slowly moved on. The lights became a legend. Podcasts debated whether Briar Ridge was a hot spot. Teenagers dared each other to sneak into the woods at night. Someone painted a mural of Lila on the side of the grocery store, her face turned upward, bathed in green. Evan watched it go up from his truck, jaw tight. At home, the silence pressed in. Lila's things remained where she'd left them, her toothbrush, her half-finished novel on the nightstand. Sometimes Evan swore he heard her walking down the hall, the soft pad of her steps just before sleep claimed him. He started drinking. That was when the dreams began in them. Lila stood at the edge of the quarry pit, eyes dark and knowing. "You don't get to erase me," she'd say. Evan woke gasping, hands clutching the sheets. 6 months later, the tip came in. A hunter reported a torn section of fencing near the quarry. Sheriff Calder followed protocol. Slow, methodical, hopeful in the way only a man chasing a long shot could be. They found the top first. Then the bones identification took a week. The story broke quietly, without fanfare. No aliens. No lights. Just another dead woman in the woods. Evan was arrested at dawn. During the interrogation, Evan said very little. He stared at the table, listening as Calder laid out the evidence, the phone records, the financial transfers, the timeline that no longer worked once the quarry was involved. "You staged the disappearance," said Calder. "You used the lights as cover?" Evan looked up, hollow-eyed. People wanted to believe it. Calder nodded. "They usually do." "What happens now?" Evan asked. The sheriff closed his notebook. "Now you tell the truth." Evan laughed, then a short, broken sound. "The truth," he said. "The truth is, she vanished either way. One way made me a monster, the other made me a victim." Calder stood. "You're both." On that night Evan was transferred out of Briar Ridge. The sky lit up again. Green, white, brilliant people gathered on their porches, whispering, pointing upward. Phones came out. Someone laughed nervously. High above the town, something streaked across the stars and vanished. No one ever agreed on what it was. But deep in the woods, beneath layers of stone and earth now disturbed, the truth remained quiet, unexplainable only to those who needed it to be. And, for the first time since that night, Evan Hawthorne was no longer there to tell the story.